Testing 1, 2, 3.
Foes also shall dash the young men to pieces, and they shall not pity the fruit of the womb. Their eye shall not spare children. And Babylon, the glory of the kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldees' excellency, shall be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah.
Alright, welcome to Lima Line Bible Studies. I'm just having a major, hold on a second, sorry. Starting a little late. Technical issues, and all of a sudden, the camera sync was off by like 3 seconds, which is a little bit much. We're continuing our study in Isaiah. Eventually, now the camera isn't working at all. Not that it matters. I was never big about doing video studies. Oh, there we go, now it's working. Alright, here we go. Alright, now you get to see all the entertaining stuff. Me flubbing around with a computer. Okay, 17. We discussed verse 16. I forgot if we touched on 17 much. We did kind of, but I just wanted to get it for context anyways. So, behold, I will stir up the Medes against them, which shall not regard silver. And as for gold, they shall not delight in it. Who is them? Them is the Babylonians here. The Medes and the Persians, which conquered the Babylonian Empire. At this stage in Isaiah, it's kind of a bit early. Time-wise, the fall of Babylon is way off, and the rise of Babylon has not exactly been fulfilled yet. I mean, the Assyrian is just reaching the peak of his power. And after that, Babylon would ascend, and then the Medes and the Persians would ascend. And so that's who's the subject here. It's the doom of Babylon. Part 1 is chapter 13 deals primarily with the city. Part 2, chapter 14 deals primarily with her king, the king of Babylon. And the Medes are the instrument of God's wrath. Just as the Assyrian was the instrument of God's wrath against Israel, the Medes would be the instrument of God's wrath against against Babylon. And the Medes are the action. There's this part of this verse here where it says, they shall not regard silver, and as for gold, they shall not delight in it. That's a verse I refer to from time to time with other verses in mind. And one of the things I warn about people, like, I'm not a general giver of investment advice, okay? And as far as, generally goes in the world, I can't tell you how to invest your money if you have money. I'm not a big investor of money. Well, I invest money, but I invest usually directly in people and things, as opposed to just, doing it through the, I don't invest, okay, whatever. Don't have any extra money. But even so, people will say like, oh, well, you should get some gold and silver in your portfolio to hedge against other inflation. And as far as that goes, as far as I know, that's fine. But whenever people come to me talking about, like, if someone says to me, the end times are coming, we should invest in silver and gold, you're out of your mind. That's how I feel when I hear that. The end times? No. I mean, for hard times or for unstable times, maybe gold. You gotta understand, in a true crisis, gold is not worth anything. You can't eat it and you can't shoot it at people. It's worthless. Gold is the biggest in a true crisis, it's not worth anything. No one wants it. Food can be traded if you have weapons to protect the food. Weapons can be traded just because weapons are worth something. But in the day of the Lord, there's nothing that can save you. There's nothing that can deliver you. There's nothing, and so that's the whole point. It's like, you can't offer them gold or silver. They don't want your gold or silver. It's not worth anything. The streets of heaven are paved with gold. That means it's worthless. We pave our streets with asphalt, sand, gravel, the cheapest, most common things. The streets in heaven are paved with gold because gold is worthless. I mean, it's great. It makes streets that don't rust. I mean, or they would wear out, obviously. They would wear down. I mean, in an earthly, if they were earthly, but it's not an earthly city, so who knows, right? Anyways, so there are also passages where it talks about, we read, people will throw their gold and their silver to the moles and the bats. Because in the day of God's fierce anger, there's no gold or silver to deliver you. Not only that, do you think if you were a Jew in the Holocaust, do you think it mattered how much gold or silver you had? If you had that yellow star of David on your arm? No, didn't matter. Didn't matter how rich you were. They'd take your gold and then they'd kill you anyways. See, there's a level at which your gold has no value. It just doesn't, because you have no value. You know what I mean? Like on a certain level. It's like, for example, I could get by, like let's say I have some food and some other guy has some guns, right? But he trades me for it. He trades me some food for some guns so I can protect the rest of my food and so he can eat. He's being civilized with me. He doesn't have to be that way. He could just point the gun at me and take the food, right? If it's a true breakdown of society. If society is truly broken down. But then on the other hand, some people will still maintain some level of civilized. Just like before there were laws, there were still customs and stuff that govern transactions, because everyone needs to be able to have some level of trust in society for us to be able to have a society at all. We have to have some trust between each other, some baseline level of human trust between individuals. And if we can't exchange in any kind of marketplace where the strong don't just dominate because they have the guns or whatever, then we just can't have a society. And that is the kind of situation you're looking at when you're talking about truly apocalyptic scenarios, where people are, people are struggling to survive, truly struggling to survive. Gold and silver, you think I'm going to trade my gun or my food for your gold? You're out of your mind. You're not going to get anything for that gold. In a true, I'm not talking about like, oh, look at the market went down and now gold and silver are up. Yeah, maybe you should buy gold. I don't know. Probably a good time with inflation about to go through the roof. I'm mostly invested in steel and a little bit of platinum. I'm just talking about all my used cars. But yeah, actual goods and materials, their value goes up when inflation goes up. So could the price of gold be about to rise? Yeah, the price of about everything is about to rise. Didn't you notice? We printed a bunch of money. That could have been, if I had extra money to invest. Actually, I did invest my money. I bought things we needed. Bought things I would regret not having if I couldn't buy them later, if they got really expensive. Because I thought about that. There's no point in hanging on to all that money, because it's about to be worth half. I don't know exactly when. I don't know if that's exactly right. I'm not predicting that like a prophet. But I strongly suggest, or I strongly suspect, the price is already going up, but the inflation's going to get worse. It's because of the laws of economics. I won't bore you with economic talks. But you can't buy off the enemy. In the end times, whatever form Antichrist takes, he's not going to be able to be bought either. Not with gold and silver. They'll want your soul as the price, for sparing you. Their bows also shall dash the young men to pieces, and they shall have no pity on the fruit of the womb. Their eyes shall not spare children. We already read last time. Their houses shall be spoiled, and their wives ravished, it said. That means raped. Their children shall be dashed to pieces before their eyes. That means bows dashing to pieces. I always thought that was such a strange thing to say, but actually, you think about it. If you have men on the wall fighting and defending the city, and they're shot with the bow, a lot of times when someone takes a fall, they would say they're dashed in pieces. It's an interesting phrase, really. You think about dashed in pieces. Because, you think about like dashing something to pieces, you think of like a pot shattering, right? I dash it to pieces. Bam! I don't think I could dash a person to pieces off of a 100-story building. I don't think I could do it. Meaning, as far as, I don't think there'd be, well, maybe a 100-story building, there wouldn't be much left. But even at terminal velocity, I guess it makes a splat. I guess that's dashed to pieces. I don't know. I don't know how far you have to fall for there to be pieces. Or how hard. That's kind of awful. But it's some distance. All I'm saying is like it's a bit of a phrase. But it just means they will be dashed. The two pieces is not a necessary clause, I guess. It's pretty awful. All right. The bow shall dash the young men to pieces. But what I mean is like if someone's standing on a wall defending a city and then they get shot with an arrow and they fall off. I guess that's how they get dashed to pieces by arrows. Because obviously arrows don't dash to pieces. They poke and they shoot into people. How do you dash someone to pieces with arrows? Well, you shoot them off a high place and they fall. That's how you dash someone to pieces with an arrow. So that must be what it's referring to. They shall have no pity on the fruit of the womb. And dash to pieces, it's like, again, just a phrase that means to kill anyway, so take it for what it's worth. I didn't even look it up in Hebrew. I wonder if it'd be funny if sometimes I regret even looking it up because it spoils the whole thing. Because it's like, oh, it doesn't mean that, and it can never mean that again. Where is it? Dash to pieces. To pieces. Ratash. And the word ratash in Hebrew means, according to the quick definition, to dash to pieces. So no need to correct there. So I assume that's what it literally means, to dash in pieces. They have one word for that. We don't even have one word for that. We have to take 3. Hebrews, they had an entire word just for that one concept. Do we have a one word for dash to pieces? Smash? Well, I mean, again, you have to say 2 pieces. I don't know. I think dash kind of implies 2 pieces, but okay. And they shall have no pity on the fruit of the womb. They don't care about you. Oh, it's a baby. Who cares? Slam. Oh, little kid. Bam. Kill him. They kill them all. That's what they did. That's what they. Okay, we only want the ones who can work. Sorry. As I said, when you take captives, you don't take the little kids. You don't take the babies. They kill them all. Take the moms and dads and the older kids and put them into slavery. That's what happens. That's how ancient warfare worked. I mean, come on. It's so funny that these days, the way they... Well, I will say this. Well, actually, American slavery was worse in many ways than ancient slavery. Especially if you read the Bible, the kind of slavery described has all, and I pointed this out over and over again. The fugitive slave law states that you may not return an escaped slave. I mean, his escape, it seems to me, must be presumed to be justified. I mean, that's why else would you make the rule like that? And basically, because a lot of people were in slavery because of debts or because of captivity, there would be a general thing to stay in that till your time was up. Because you could serve for a certain term if it was a debt. If you're a prisoner, you serve forever, possibly. But you're a stranger in your strange land. You're old, like, let's say you watch your village get burnt down, and now you're a slave to somebody who bought you after the army. So this guy has nothing to do with the people who killed your parents and, and your family and your whole village. And your village is gone. You can't go back to it. And you don't know anybody in this new land, and you don't even speak the language. What are you going to do? You going to run away? Well, maybe. But what would cause you to run away? Well, maybe if the person who purchased you was exceedingly cruel. And so in the Bible, the Hebrew law, the law of Moses says that you may not return a fugitive slave. It was not to be returned. He was allowed. A fugitive slave was to be sheltered in any city he came to. And I assume that's just because slavery was not so bad that they didn't have a lot of fugitive slaves. And if someone was a runaway, he was given the presumption of good reason. Because, like I said, why else would you have a law like that? It's my theory. Okay, just so you know. But that is not to say, if American slavery was better than like biblical slavery, it wasn't better than Assyrian slavery, I'll tell you that. Or Babylonian slavery, or the Mede slavery. They could be pretty, they were not, it wasn't tempered with some sort of like, we got to be Christian about this somehow. Not that there's much Christian about being a slave owner at all. There's nothing about it all. But the thing is, and like I said, and I'll say 1,000 times, but when people, the reason I bring it up in part is one, because they're being taken into captivity, and that is slavery. But also because it comes up, and people will challenge you. They'll say, "Oh, the Bible condones slavery," and what do you say to that? And of course, the Bible does condone slavery in a sense by having laws regulating it. It's implicitly condoning it, So that's fine, no argument there. But it also has passages condemning it. And so the question is, do people even understand what they're reading when they read the Bible? Because the Bible is not just a book; it is a collection of books written by a collection of individuals. So there's the idea that there's like only one thought on slavery in the Bible, or on many subjects, is wrong. And though the Bible is God's word to man, not every word in the Bible is spoken by God. I mean, we could quote all kinds of people. The bad guys talk too, and so you gotta be aware of what you're reading. They have no pity on children, on the fruit of the womb. We went over that pretty significantly last time. I don't think I need to beat it to death as far as the cruelty of the ancient world. But also, I want to talk in some more general terms. I want to go on about this verse a little more. I have more to say. In our time, it's good to bring it home. In our time, we live in a world, right, where we have things are changing rapidly. They're putting in all kinds of things. It's like I've often said, like, things aren't any worse than they used to be 100 years, or not. I mean, morally, things were a lot worse a long time ago than they were, like, say, 10 years ago. And I don't know that it's morally much worse now, honestly, as far as the individual people. And I still stand by, people are still people. But the wickedness is more open. And that's what I would say. It is open, and not only that, they're forcing it down our throats. And not only forcing it down our throats, but forcing it down the throats of our children. Of course. What else? And these perverts and degenerates, want to get a hold of your children and want to indoctrinate them with filth and with crazy ideas. Like they maybe, like, if you're a boy, maybe you're not a boy or something. That's crazy talk. That's crazy talk. We used to understand that was insanity. Like, I'm a male. That's a true. There are exceptions, like people who have odd chromosomes. I don't know. There's some, again, but that's just like an exception. Exceptions prove the rule, though. They don't deny, they don't like negate the rule. An exception to the rule doesn't mean the rule doesn't exist. It just means like, wow, there's an exception. But for every other case, it's this way. I thought it was raining. I realized it's my computer. I thought it was the sound of like rain on a tin roof. Then I'm like, I don't have a tin roof. I don't think you guys can hear it quite the way I do. Okay. But they don't, when it comes to corrupting, the corruptors of the world don't care about your children. They will corrupt them. They will fill their minds with perverse thoughts. You know what I mean? Like the idea that you think they're gonna, yeah, I mean, like people really, what's about to come is gonna be nuts. I think potentially, if it goes, if they don't put the brakes on, but I don't see how they're gonna do it. With all this immorality that's coming down the pipe, and the adult, it's like the adults teaching it to kids. It's just, you know. I mean, you think about it. Like your children are all in, not your children, but the children of many of Americans are in school right now. I mean, if they live in a state that's free, whatever. But I mean, whatever state you're in, usually they should be in school, quote unquote, should be in school right now learning. But they have them there. They have them there, and in some ways, in their minds, those children belong to them. The school thinks they kind of own those kids, your kids. They do. And they have some sort of special dispensation over them. You know, they have control of them all day. They see them maybe more than you do if you're a parent of a child in school. It's, they're close. They see them almost as much as you do, for sure. They see them 8 hours a day. 7 or so, really, actually, right? And then, you know, how much time do parents spend with their kids? I don't know. But they're spending their time with them, and they are filling their heads with perversity. You know, and if your kid, now they come to the point where if your little kid, if he indicates, or she, that they think they might be just they want to be the opposite gender. They want to be the opposite sex. Let's keep terms proper. I want to be the opposite sex, or they think they are, or whatever. They're going to go on that. The word of a child, you know, sometimes my 5-year-old is like a banana. Or, you know, I mean, I'm making that up, but I mean, like, they make themselves into a lot of funny things. You know, like today they might be a rubber duck. I don't know. 5-year-olds are funny like that. But like to take the word of a child like that and then to alter their life forever. Like to do that to a person. They're going to be an adult later and have to deal with a choice they didn't make at 5. I mean, they didn't even make that choice. Some adult decided to experiment on them. And if you think they care about your children, if you think that it matters to them, the damage they're going to do to their kid, you don't understand. They have good intentions in that all. The consequences to your children do not matter at all. All that matters is that they get to fulfill whatever their will is. And if it's, you know, to mangle and to otherwise, you know, mutilate children and poison them, basically. Poison them with hormones that don't belong in their body. They want to poison them and mangle them. And they will die. And you don't think having your kid's penis cut off is a form of dashing them to pieces, mangling them and deforming them? You know, I know that's not where they start. You know what I mean? But this is a cruel world we're entering into. Like, they do this to kids. I think about what they're doing. When I think about all the bad decisions I made at 5 or 6... I mean 5 or 6? I didn't want to think about 5 or 6. Are you kidding me? My decision making? I didn't like my decision making from when I was 17. Thank God nobody was like, just, you know, like letting me do whatever I want. What do you want to do? You know? And what if I said, you know, I want to be a rainbow. So I need to smoke as much weed as possible as a 15-year-old. So I can be a rainbow. Or I need LSD. I need LSD so I can be a fish in a shoebox on the moon. You know what I mean? Because that's what my real identity is. I'm a fish in a shoebox on the moon. And I can only get there if I use LSD. I mean, that's the equivalent. That's why I feel like this is. I think I'm the opposite sex. The only way I can get there is with hormones. Right? I mean, like I said, a 17-year-old who says, I need LSD, I need to be a fish in a box on the moon. You're going to say, I think you need to, I mean, maybe we raised you wrong, son, or something, Right? They're going to do these, they're already doing these permanent life-changing surgeries and chemical poisons. I mean, hormones, whatever. But it's like I mean, it's almost like a poison at this point, in my mind, because of what you're doing. But the adults will do this, and it's like, you ever spend any time with have any of them ever raised a human being from youth to see them change to know that, like, the person that becomes like an adult is not that they may remember being that 5-year-old, but that 5-year-old is so friggin' incompetent and so off, and like that what they're doing is, it is so cruel to make a young child's decisions permanent. You know what I mean? It's like you ask a little boy when he's 5, like, or something, hey, you want to be a sissy? We'll dress you in pink and put you in a dress. And, I don't even mean like, I just mean cross-dressing. But then all I mean is cross-dressing. I don't mean anything else. I just mean, like, do you want to dress up like a girl? Go ahead, right? But then imagine making him do that for the rest of his life, based on wanting to do it when you said you wanted to do it when you were 5. So now for the rest of your life, you're going to be that. What kind of people are these? They're cruel. The people who are doing this in our society are equivalently wicked and cruel as the Medes and Persians who dashed people's lives to pieces without a second thought. The consequences of these actions, like these doctors, like, I'd like to have them in my workshop. I'd like to pull their fingernails off and stuff and maybe stomp their skulls a little bit. I'm a very violent-hearted person, as you can tell. I no doubt my ancestors were murderers, by the way. I don't, because I have it in me. I have the cruelty of a killer. Especially when it comes to, because the injustice part of it makes it easy. I mean, when you give me a reason, man, and when I hear about what this has done, what they're doing to people, it's not even, it shouldn't be the sort of thing where that happen. It's not exactly obvious how you stop it, You protect your own kids, but then it's like, they're doing human experimentation. They're turning our country into the island of Dr. Moreau, where he was turning people into pigs. That's essentially it's the same kind of abominations. Turning a man into a woman is not that big of a step down in abomination from turning a man into a pig, I'll tell you that. Not that, I mean, let's say, turning a woman into a man is not that big a step down of an abomination from turning a woman into a pig. There you go. Ladies, you'll feel much better about that one. Because I agree. Turning a man into a woman is not like turning a man into a pig. That's right. Bad choice. It's like turning a man into a peacock or a beautiful bird of paradise. Is what it is like. But it's still an abomination, isn't it? All right. In Babylon, the glory of the kingdom, the beauty of the Chaldees' excellency shall be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. That's the ultimate fate. Babylon, who the glorious kingdom, the excellency of the Chaldees' excellency, the beauty of their excellency, the beautiful hanging gardens of Babylon, the beautiful city, the glory of their kingdom, this, at their peak, their glory, it's going to pass away. Like when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. But, to this day, they're still like, we think this might be where it was. And again, Sodom and Gomorrah, it's not just, we always have homosexuals, always been around. And homosexuality itself is a sin. It's considered an abomination. So is a lying tongue. So don't get too worried about it, all right? I mean, as far as like, I don't want to up on that too much. But of course, just like heterosexuality is not a big deal, homosexuality is like a slight deviation from that. It's maybe not more than slight, but whatever. It's a deviation from that, right? But it's the first deviation. It's not like huge. It gets worse, because heterosexuality, you can have rape, right? And that's a sin, a bad sin, or fornication, which is also a sin, closer to homosexuality, right? Those are all sins, but it's not like Sodom and Gomorrah, where it's like, angels walk into town and the whole town comes out to rape them. That's a little beyond the pale. I always say, I think most of the gay folks would admit that is probably that's pretty bad. When we're coming to town, and it gives homosexuals a bad name. Though, like I said, as a Christian, I can't. As much as people want to be cool about it, I can't. It's not righteous. If you have those desires, I've seen guys do it, and I feel bad, but they live celibately because something's broken. It's the result of possibly, from scientific understanding, some sort of hormonal imbalance in utero, and so forever you have your mind messed up and the attraction's all screwed up because of things that are beyond your control. Because I don't think anyone would choose that. Well, some people might choose it, but they are particularly degenerate people. I don't think the majority of people who are quiet, just normal people living gay lives are not as... Well, they're not necessarily choosing it, is what I'm saying. They're not so degenerate that they would choose it. So degenerate that they would come out and rape people. That's quite degenerate. And that's the focus of Sodom and Gomorrah. It was not merely that it was, like I said, I've said this before, it's not that they came in and the angels peeked in the window and saw two men holding hands on the couch and screamed, "Bring the fire and bloody brimstone." That's not how it happened. It was a very different experience. So it's always sort of like, and though I'll tell you what, for the abomination of man lying with another man, there was the death penalty in the Old Testament law. The death penalty came for a lot of things, okay? And so it is. That was the law. And it's like, same thing with adultery. It was the death penalty. Jesus said, whoever's without sin, let him cast the first stone. So I'm not interested in putting anyone to death for their sins, because that would mean my own. I'm ready here to be stoned also. So, I don't want to. That's not the Christian way, is to just bash people for their sins. But we can't just say it's okay, because it's not. It's not okay. It's not Sodom and Gomorrah, but it's not okay. But it's not. It doesn't. Like I said, Christians often have sins that they struggle with. They become Christian, and then they delivered from many sins, but then there are things that linger, or things they discover, or new things that crop up. Right? And our walk with the Lord is a prayerful walk where we are fighting against sin, struggling against it with God's help. And that can work for anybody. It doesn't matter what your sin is. It doesn't matter if it's something so inextricably, embedded in your character that you can't get free from it. There's lots of things that we can't free ourselves from, because sin is a form of bondage. Some of them are so deeply ingrained in us, it has nothing to do with, it's not about any choice you're going to make, about any, you don't have power over it. You can make choices in your life to stop the sin, but the root causes of the sin are not based on choices. The root causes. There's things down below that aren't choices. After you have these urges and the feelings, you make choices that are, that you're responsible for, but the feelings you can't respond to. You can respond. What I mean is, you can only respond to, but you can't control. Like, feelings are hard to control. You can get control of them, but when you get blindsided, it's hard. To control your feelings when you get hit with something you don't expect, very difficult. But yeah, people cannot be held ultimately responsible for, because like I said, otherwise, where does temptation come in? Because Jesus was tempted. You know, he was tempted. So tempted is that would be tempting. You know, don't like easiest place. So you want to talk about Jesus' temptation? Just go to his temptation. Well, in the wilderness, but also the cross. You know, he didn't want to go. You know, he didn't want to go. It's okay. He went anyways. You know what I mean? It's okay he didn't want to go to be crucified. I mean, gee, what do you expect? Like, oh yeah, I just can't wait to get the nails in my hands and my feet. I can't wait to get that spear in me. Let's go. And of course he was reluctant. Of course he was like, is there another way? I mean, you know, I mean, what do you expect? You know what I mean? God made him as human as, or God became as human can be. And in so being, he had to be tempted. In so being, he had to have feelings and deal with it. When God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah, there was nothing left. And the Babylonian Empire, there's still Babylon, you know, and they have ruins these days. But I mean, as far as like the actual glory of their kingdom, the height, that was over. It's done. After Assyria, never again. They would never be a major power again. It shall never be inhabited. Neither shall it be dwelt in from generation to generation. Neither shall the Arabian pitch tent there. Neither shall the shepherds make their fold there. But wild beasts of the desert shall lie there, and their houses shall be full of doleful creatures. And owls shall dwell there, and satyrs shall dance there. And the wild beasts of the islands shall cry in their desolate houses, and dragons in their pleasant palaces. And her time is near to come, and her days shall not be prolonged. Some weird translation going on there, so we'll have to fix that. So, Babylon shall never be inhabited. Now, Babylon was not an inhabited city for a long time. The ancient city of Babylon, and until Saddam Hussein dressed up the ruins and set up some buildings so people could visit Babylon. But that, you know, it's not an inhabited city; it's more like a showcase. But you could interpret it as Arabian. I have interpreted Saddam Hussein's actions in Babylon when he was setting things up as being an Arabian pitching tent there, actually, because remember, there are multiple fulfillments of prophecy. And the first part, the city part of chapter 13, dealing with that part feels very connected to the past, and I only see shadows of the future. But when you talk about chapter 14, man, we're getting into some prophecy that's really talking about things that we could look forward to in the book of Revelation, or meaning looking forward, not necessarily with eager anticipation, but at least with forewarning. So Saddam Hussein put up the stuff, and he's the Iraqis and stuff a lot. Well, it depends on the Iraqi is such. I said the Iraqis. It's like it's a whole nation. It's like saying the Americans. The Americans are all Italians. I mean, the Iraqis. I was about to say are Arabs, but obviously, in Iraq you have Arabs, you have Kurds, you have Assyrians, and so et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the whatever, if there are Arabians pitching tent there, whatever, you know, it was just meant to say that no one would even like come. An Arabian pitches tent there means like a guy with his flocks, like a Bedouin, someone who's a migrant, not migrant, a nomad. Nomad is not the same as a migrant, right? Very different. Nomad's a wanderer. A migrant is migrating. A nomadic sort of shepherd might pitch his tent for a night in the ruins of an old city because of the protection it would afford. And what he's saying is, it will not even be so inhabited. That's like the least amount of habitation is some nomad occasionally pitching his tent in your city. No one there. And it doesn't, does it have to be literally true? No, the point is, it's just so uninhabited. But if you took it as a, jokingly, as a prophetic of, well, Saddam Hussein kind of broke that. Well, maybe it's because the prophecy itself is not fully fulfilled. Because Babylon of the old Babylon is not the Babylon we're really talking about here. We're talking about Babylon of the book of Revelation. Mystery Babylon. Because chapter 13, the city is Mystery Babylon. In the prophetic future time. Well, when we're interpreting it in a futurist sense for prophecy. Obviously, Isaiah in his... I just realized I'm clipping a lot. Obviously, Isaiah in his time is not thinking of, but the Holy Spirit, of course, is delivering prophecy of days to come. So, this... you read about the destruction of Babylon in the book of Revelation. It's very complete also, very similar. And anyways, well, I should talk about the verses. Actually, I have much more to say about it. But the wild beasts of the desert lying there and being inhabited by wild beasts. Okay, whatever. Doleful means like howling. I also dwell there. Satyrs would be wild goat. Wild goat. It would not mean like a little man with a pan flute and horns on his head and goat's feet dancing around like a fawn. You know what I mean? Like I am the fawn. So it means goats shall dance. So yeah, wild goats shall frolic in the ruins. And the wild beasts of the islands. Islands are coasts or the borders. Islands is really a weird word in the New Testament, in the Bible. When you see the word islands, you gotta remember it means like the coast. It can mean like an island, like because it's nothing but a coast, obviously. But it does mean islands, but often more often it means like the borders. You know what I mean? From the edges. There's wild beasts of the surrounding areas. You know what I mean? Is what it means there. In fact, if you think of an island as a place surrounded by the sea, you see why you get that idea? Surrounding areas, borders, boundaries, and such. That's the idea of an island. It's a bound piece of land. And so also you can have a land, Babylon itself, the nation is also like an island. See, that's the thing. It is an island in a sense. So it has coasts. And you'll see when you read the Old Testament, you will see references where it talks about the coasts thereof, and it's the same word. I'm just trying to get my camera to sync up again. Okay. That's close enough. So islands cry in their desolate houses. Dragons. Dragons usually translate jackals. Usually should be translated jackals. Like dogs. And there's one passage in particular that says, they snuffed up the wind like dragons, which is like this. That's how they snuff up the wind. Or they snuffed up the wind like dragons. It's a weird thing to say. You see a verse like that. That's why I say the King James is not the greatest translation in the world. There's some definite problems with it. And I wish they'd come up with just like a fixed King James where they would take the 1611 version. But this is not the 1611 version, by the way. This is like 18 whatever version. I have the 1611 version. I should put it up sometime. It's almost unreadable. If you like reading S's as F's, because they make their F's into S's or S's into F's. All the S's look like F's, and you want to pronounce them as F's. It's hard not to. So you keep finding yourself lisping as you read the old King James. I do. I just because the F's just my brain sees F, even though it's an S, because that's what it looks like. It's weird. I'll show it. Sometime we'll get it out. Dragons in their pleasant palaces. Jackals. Dogs. Wild dogs. All right? And her time is near to come. Her days shall not be prolonged. Her time is near to come. It was like a century off, though. I believe. It depends on when this was written. It is part of the first half of Isaiah, which was written before the Assyrian captivity. So that's significantly before the Babylonian captivity. At least like 50 years, I think. I forgot when the date of the Babylonian captivity was. I'm not going to look it up now. Because my dates are slightly off anyways. But I think it was a few decades later at least, right? I know it was sometime later. All I know is that in my Bible, it says the Assyrian captivity was in 611 BC. 611. Now that was... I know they've changed the dates since my Bible was published. So they've moved that up. It's like 584 or something like that. And then the Babylonian captivity would be in the 5s somewhere, okay? Yeah, so if the Assyrian captivity is like 611, the Babylonian one, or the Babylonian is then like 5 something. I think it's 5 something. It's not 4 something. Oh, poop. I'm going to look up. Let's just look up at Jeremiah. I want to know. I hate guessing at stuff like that. It just seems like. I know the Assyrian date is solid as far as that's what my Bible says. It's not what modern scholars say, but whatever. It's good enough for a thumbnail. I don't need to know exactly when it happened. Oh, okay. So, like, when Jeremiah's prophesying, it's like 498. So it's about 100 years later. So I was right with my first thing. Babylonian captivity is like 100 years later. That makes sense. It would take some time for something like that to rise up again. It's interesting because it's like World War II wasn't even 100 years ago. But it seems like ancient history, doesn't it? It seemed like ancient history when I was a kid. And it's weird to me that to my kids, World War II is like World War I was to me. And there is no World War II, sort of. There's this nonsense. We're in trouble. And I'll tell you what, we spent these trillions of dollars. That was all all the flexibility we had to wage a giant war. If we got into World War, we'd be in big trouble. Of course, we were last time too, so don't worry about it too much. God is in control. That, as my wife says, isn't it nice to know? Tell yourself that. Her days shall not be prolonged. Well, more than what is allotted. There's no mercy granted. Is what is, there's no reprieve going to be given. We can give him a little more time. Sometimes that happens. That actually happened with Assyria. Assyria had more time given because of the prophecy of Jonah. We got 10 minutes. We're not going to end early. Heck no. We don't end early. We end late. That's what we do every time, right? An hour is just the minimum marker. Though I thought about switching the study to a half hour. The truth is, I would enjoy doing like an hour and a half. Or 2 maybe. 2 would be a bit much though. After 2 hours. Though there are radio hosts who talk for 3. But I think they tend to talk slower and pace themselves. Because after an hour, sometimes I'm quite exhausted if I really been, on top of it, if I'm doing a good study. Some people say, as my wife says, that was a good study. For the Lord will have mercy on Jacob. Notice there's really no break. The chapter break is unnecessary. In fact, really, I should say the beginning of this chapter is verse 3. In my when I did the song, part 2 begins on verse 3, and you'll see why. Verse 1 and 2 belongs with chapter 13. It's another badly divided chapter. Her time is near to come, and her days shall not be prolonged, for the Lord will have mercy on Jacob, and will yet choose Israel, and set them in their own land, and the strangers shall be joined with them, and they shall cleave to the house of Jacob. Because the Assyrians and the Babylonians, well, there'd be no deliverance from the Assyrian captivity except through the Babylonian and Median. I mean, you'd have to survive for 100 years in captivity. So a lot of the pre-captives. Well, here's the thing about the captivities of the Jews. Okay, that you should know and you should think about. Jews are not all alike. This idea that people have that Jews are all the same, which I feel like people do, whether they say it or not, is so off. Let me explain one thing. Like, we think of Jews as being very holding on to their culture and being very family oriented and stuff. These are all stereotypes that are true of some people, right? They're true of some people and of the group as a whole also. There's of some of them. But not everyone who's Jewish is like that. Not everyone who's Jewish is like the stereotypical Jew. And so when they get carried into captivity, it's not like they all maintain their Jewish heritage. Especially when you consider that the reason they were being punished and thrown into captivity is because they despised God's covenant. They despised their heritage. They went after strange gods. They were not familiar with God's word. They were not familiar with his customs or anything like that. Many of these people. And they are the reason God sent the Assyrians against Israel. They are the reason that Israel is being punished. They are specifically the ones for whom the punishment is coming due. And they are the ones specifically who are going to die in the punishment more than likely. and not get, there are some who will survive into their captivity and then go off into captivity, but they're never going to be heard from or seen again because they're a cursed generation. They are offspring that are rejected. But there are Jews in every generation in the captivities who loved the firstborn of the poor shall feed, as it said, and all that, and the needy shall lie down in safety. God has his eye always on his people who love him and who are faithful to him. And so there's that too. There are people who will survive for hundreds and even thousands of years away from their home because they hang on to their identity and the covenant of God through their Jewish heritage. But not all the Jews are like that. So in the captivity, many of the people who were taken into the Assyrian captivity never resurfaced again as Jews. And as it was written, they were left few in number among the heathen as they were scattered, and they were absorbed among them, is the way it should be understood. Now, some people think the children of Israel as a group migrated into Europe and became the white races, which is ridiculous because there were already people there. There have already been people there for centuries. The timelines are all wrong. Someone a while ago sent me a letter about someone criticizing my criticism of E. Raymond Capt, who was the writer of things like Tracing Our Ancestors and a lot of this Anglo-Israelite stuff about migrating Jews during the captivities and all that. And, his book, one of the, I didn't respond to the letter. I wish I had, because I know the guy thinks he's so smart. He said I didn't refute anything properly. And the problem with E. Raymond Capt is he made all his stuff up. How do you refute things that there's no evidence for? Meaning, they're self-refuting. I don't need to refute anything E. Raymond Capt said because E. Raymond Capt is a liar. Or he used lies, if you want to say it. I don't know if he himself made the stuff up or if he got his charts from another liar, but the information he has is lies. It's not real. The migrations he talks about are all fake things, maps that were made up. There's no evidence. You cannot confirm. The reason E. Raymond Capt's garbage is because you cannot independently confirm anything he says. Nothing he says, there's any evidence any of it's true. I'm being a little overbroad there. True, okay. But the general, the maps and stuff, the evidence he brings forth is just made up trash. That's why there's no refuting it. Because when someone just makes something up, if I say I have a purple dragon in my garage, and I say if I say, well, refute it, and you're like, well, I don't believe you, I say, well, you haven't refuted it. You just said you didn't believe me, but I've got the evidence here. Look, I drew a picture. Here's my garage with a dragon in it. See? There's a picture of my garage with a dragon in it. There you go. Proof. Well, that picture could be faked. Yeah. Especially when it's just like E. Raymond Capt, and a lot of people might not know what I'm talking about, but he's not famous, but if you get into Anglo-Israelism, and the reason I'm talking about that is because the captivities are exceedingly important in the Anglo-Israelite doctrine, because the captivities are what create the Anglo-Israelites in their mythology. Only problem, no evidence for those migrations. No evidence for any of those things that he says are happening. None. The ethnic studies, none of that. There's no evidence for it. And there's no reason why, if it was there, that it wouldn't be available. Everything can't be a conspiracy to hide your little crazy truth. You know what I mean? Oh, it's a conspiracy. Really? Why would that be a conspiracy? What's the motivation? That's how I was finding. What's the motivation? Everyone's conspiring to hide the truth about the angels that sinned and about the migrations that doesn't matter and all that other stuff that doesn't matter. I said, whenever someone says there's a cover-up, you gotta have a motivation. There's gotta be a good reason. Well, let's look at these verses and then we'll pick up at 3 tomorrow. For the Lord, okay. He will yet choose. God has not cast off his people. Now, it doesn't mean, you understand, when it says God hasn't cast off his people that he chose and all that, and God chose Israel and he will yet choose them. And like the Apostle Paul says, that blindness has happened to Israel, but they are enemies for the gospel's sake, but beloved for the Father's sake. What's that all mean? Well, Israel, like Paul says, not all Israel are Israel. Let me explain. See, just because you're born of Israel, of Jacob, the seed of Jacob, doesn't mean you are Israel. Doesn't mean you get to inherit God's promise. Doesn't mean you're a true Jew. Because a lot of people throughout the Old Testament, and they'll be like, we were traveling, and then certain sons of Belial kidnapped a woman, raped her, and killed her, or whatever. And these are Israelites, though, but they're described as sons of Belial or Belial, depending on how you want to pronounce it. It's probably Belial or Belial, actually, Belia, because I would be pronounced E and E would be A if it's being transliterated properly. I don't even know if that's right, though. So Belial, Belial, whatever. I've always liked Belial, but I'm almost certain that's not how you say that. Belial. It's probably right. Bailey. We mean lords. Belial. All right. But there'll be certain wicked men. Jews. Evil Jews. They are not well, let me go back. Not all Israel. Because you understand, being born a Jew only entitles you to the promises and the covenant. You got to participate. Your parents got to circumcise you. You have to do your Jewish stuff. You got to follow Judaism to be a Jew. Not all Jews do. And they're ethnic Jews, but on some level they're not. And if they have, and if, let's say, you get kidnapped in captivity and all that stuff, and they're ungodly and all, and then they get kidnapped, that identity never meant anything to them to begin with. So they lose it. What I'm saying is, the people who hated God in the land, when they were taken into captivity, didn't suddenly wake up and start becoming proper Jews. They were still renegades in captivity. It didn't change them. It might change some people, right? Someone with a conscience who had maybe, like I said, when I was young, I was reading my Bible, but I was kind of living a self-pleasuring lifestyle, and I was mostly interested in my own pleasure. Not, I kind of was a Christian. I was definitely, if you said, are you a believer? I believe in Jesus, of course. But I wasn't a zealous Christian as far as in my own personal life. My pleasures came first. Jesus was more like my mascot or something. It's like, that's my team. Don't talk bad about my team. Jesus, my team. That was more like, it was my brand or something. Like it was my country or something. I have some sort of unquestioning loyalty to Jesus that has nothing to do with my experienced life. I was loyal to Christ and Christianity and believed in it, but somehow that was completely disconnected from the way I lived my life at that time. And that's a lot like, and then a big event can shake me out of that and then turn me to God. And that can happen with a Jew too, who is living a secular life, but they know what they should be doing, and then something happens, and then it snaps them into being more attentive to their religious obligations and such. But whether we have or not, the Jews, they go into captivity. Some are going to be faithful, some are not. I don't think I have to say anything more about that. Then, some are going to be faithful, some are not. Some are going to receive the rebuke, some are not. But why am I talking about it? Oh, because he will yet choose Israel, sure. They are beloved for the Father's sake. The point is, Jews have to participate in their covenant. If they don't, God rejects them, and that's in the covenant. They have to participate. I ask a Jew, like, what if you refuse to circumcise your kids? You're still a Jew, but you're a Jew, but you're in bad standing with God. You should do all those things because that's what Jews are supposed to do. And God won't be happy with you, and it could go well. It would go badly with you. They would say, if they believe in these things, it'll go badly with you. Do what you're supposed to do. Follow the covenant. And if they don't, they get cast off. Now, the whole nation gets never cast off. Now, you could say, now people say, well, Paul, wait a second, the whole nation is cast off. Well, I see what you're saying. What you mean is most Jews don't believe. That's how you feel. And therefore, in general, Jews are not Christians. In general, Jews are enemies of the gospel. Enemies of the quote, I'm putting quotes around it. Because not now. Not really. Not in general. The reason that was said generally at the time the Bible was written, the Jews were the enemy of the gospel, because they literally were. They were literally fighting Christianity every step of the way. And that was the leadership, too. It wasn't even just the common people, though some common people would be complicit. Some common people would not be complicit. It'd be hard to tell from this perspective, from this far away. We don't know. But there'll be both, right? The Jews of Jesus' day were hunting people down, trying to stomp out Christianity. But that's not all. Right, but meaning when I say that, I meant like the leaders who control the population, quote unquote. Because nobody totally controls the population, but they are the leaders. It's like I have leaders, right? We have leaders in the state, but I don't even obey them. You know what I mean? But they're still my leaders, and in some way they control things over me, right? They have a big effect, not too outsized, but they definitely have an effect. Same thing with the Jews. The leaders have an effect on the whole population. If they're not following the new Messiah, there are people who go along with the leaders. So we have all this mixture of peoples. So yeah, God does still choose Israel. Israel still has a covenant that it's all there for them. The Messiah is still for them. It's all waiting for them. And you understand, every year thousands and thousands of Jews take advantage of that. Thousands and thousands of Jews find the Messiah every year. There are many Jews in the world, and thousands are, I don't know exactly how many, probably millions actually, are Christians. Some of them lose their identity, some hold on. Over the centuries, some have, when they've converted to Christianity, they give up their identity as Jews because it becomes hard to maintain it outside of the Commonwealth of Israel. And since the Commonwealth of Israel is still under the control of the anti-Christians. And that's the thing, is that it's who controls the Commonwealth. And God, and that's God's doing. You understand? That's where the blindness has happened, is because they that lead them are continuing to lead them astray. Though for every Jew, they still have access to the Messiah. The nation as a whole is blind. But individuals can see. If God gives them the grace. But they haven't been cast off. God still chooses Jews. He always has. But he still rejects Jews also. He always has. And it goes back to people who weren't even technically Jews. Jacob. Look at Jacob. Jacob is Israel. And he's the chosen one. And when you go back to that very instance, you got to remember that he was chosen over his twin brother. They were twin brothers. They were not fraternal. But they were born together. Same mother, same father, same genetics. Two totally different nations. But the same people, essentially. Esau. It's his brother. See, that's the point, though. One was rejected, one was received. And it's the same way with the Jews to this day. Jews sometimes have little Esau's in the family. Profane people who reject the covenant, who don't do what's right. So, that's the syndrome that goes on. And the whole nation is run by Esau, in a sense. They've been rejected, like Esau. But God has not cast off his people, not entirely. No, he yet chooses them, yes. But there's still those who are rejected among them. And the nation as a whole stands as though rejected because of their blindness. But they have not been rejected. But blindness in part has happened to them. They were enemies for the gospel's sake. Now, not so much. Jews aren't particularly harmful to the gospel, except some places where they, like it still might be illegal to preach the gospel in Israel at least to Jews. I don't know if it is. It's interesting because I know there are Jews who are working very hard on that. Here's the cool thing about the Jews. Like, there are lots of evangelical Jews who are very much, taking care of the Jewish issue as far as, like, if you're worried about preaching the gospel to Jews. There are Jews who are very, very concerned with that and very excited to be the ones over it, to concern themselves with it. And the people shall take them. Okay. He will and set them return their captive. He's going to set them in their own land, and strangers shall be joined with them and cleave the house of Jacob. This is alluding to. It's funny because here's the thing. When I was in the Anglo-Israelite point of view, this is a verse. Nobody talked about this, okay? But this is definitely a positive thing. Strangers shall be joined with them; they shall cleave to the house of Jacob. That's meant to be a positive development. That's why it's said like that. God will choose them. Strangers will be joined with them. And cleave to the house of Jacob. Strangers. You understand? For the Anglo-Israelite believing people who believe in the white identity movement, one of the things, like Arnold Murray used to teach, we go through Ezra, and he pointed out, look at all these strangers when they came back from captivity. There's all these people. These aren't Jews, Perizzites, Babylonites, Hamathites, Kenites. All these strangers joined to them. It's insidious. I found a great secret. When they came back from captivity, there were non-Jews present, non-Israelites. And from that, they come up with the myth that these non-Israelites replaced them, so that when Jesus came, the Jews that rejected him were not ethnically Jewish. They were actually ethnically something else, something more sinister, maybe even the devil's own children. And that's the myth that persists to this day, that the Jews are not normal humans, but they are actually some sort of a hybrid offspring of Satan, which is ridiculous, but would explain why they're so smart. Yeah, I'm just kidding. Oh, that explains why Jews do so well, right? And that's the temptation. It's like, oh, look at it. But it's like, well, couldn't it also be explained by how blessed they are by God? What do you mean? Satan doesn't, I never heard of Satan doing this. Like, oh, Satan, he sort of takes care of his children. It says so even here. You know what Satan does to his people? He slays them. Satan is a waster of his own people. He is not like that. He does not, I'll take care of my own. He has no his own. You know who his own are? Him. Satan only serves himself. Course, he doesn't serve others. He has no people for whom he lays his life down or takes risks or other. Puts himself out for you or for any of his servants. No. You're right. We're gonna enjoy chapter 14 this week. So the people shall take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel shall possess them in the land of the Lord for servants and handmaids. Because the servants that are joined, they're going to not be they're going to be like servants and handmaids. And shall take them captives, whose captives they were, and they shall rule over their oppressors. That sounds a lot like Revelation chapter 13. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience of the saints. If any man have an ear, let him hear, it had said in that passage also. That's a very important cryptic passage in the middle of chapter 13. And it has to do with the beast. And Babylon and the beast are intertwined. The woman rides on the beast, Babylon. She rides the beast. Babylon is the woman. She rides the beast. There's also the king of Babylon implied. Mystery Babylon implies as a king of Babylon. The king of Babylon is chapter 14. In fact, verse 3 says, this is the lamentation, or 14 and 3 is the beginning of the introduction, but it's like you're going to take up this proverb against the king of Babylon. That's what we're going to talk about. The king of Babylon we're going to spend on this week. It's the Antichrist. It's going to be an exciting chapter. You won't want to miss it. So they're going to take captivity who were captive. The reversal of fortunes, where those who were oppressing become the oppressed or ruled over. Not. It should be that when reversal of fortunes happens, where like we were under cruel bondage, let's say, but when we become rulers, we should not be cruel. And when it turns around, and that's to be the lesson we learn, not to be cruel, but to be kind in our what's given to us. Because though there is not slavery, there is still a kind of mastery. People are stuck. People get into, how many people are stuck in dead-end jobs? It's not much better than being a slave. You got no choice. As far as like, some people would say, I don't believe in like slave wages and stuff. A man who can sell his labor and take it somewhere else is not a slave. But sometimes people feel like it. You know what I mean? They feel oppressed and captivated. In a marginal sense, in a toned down sense, yes, I understand. But not like this. So I'm saying when he returns their captivity, he's really going to fix things up. And those who were taken captive are going to return the captivity. Now it's going to go dark again in the next few verses. But that's the mercy of God to Jacob. He would bring them back from their captivity. I don't think I have anything more to say. I could talk on about it. We've talked about all these subjects about oppression and slavery and stuff. But also, you hear also the idea of the Gentiles being grafted into the vine of Israel. Part of what the mystery of the church is that the church is Jew and Gentile together in one body, and that's being alluded to here. Maybe not specifically laid out because it's considered a mystery that's only revealed in the New Testament, that the Jew and the Gentile would become one body, because it's not obvious here that is the case. Again, here, the strangers are joined with them, but as servants, as handmaids, not as equals, not as brothers. So that's a different thing that's revealed in the New Testament. So thanks for joining this study. We'll pick up with verse 3 tomorrow. Until then, remember to say your prayers and have a nice day. I'm trying to come up with the most milquetoast down the middle catchphrase.